It's the Sam and Jessica show.
Yeah.
Hello. Do you want to introduce yourself or should I introduce you?
I don't know. What do you think?
This is Professor Samantha Corrington, a teaching professor at the University of Victoria in the School of Child and Youth Care. Sam brings with her today several decades worth of child and youth care experience, family counseling. She has a master's degree in
Marriage and family therapy.
Marriage and family therapy. She has been in the School of Child and Youth Care for many years now as a teaching professor.
Yes.
And before that, a sessional instructor. She has a bachelor's degree in history, which is really weird.
I know. And a second one in child and youth care. So I got 2 undergrad degrees.
Yeah.
Not 1, 2.
Why did you do that?
You know, it's interesting, not to launch right in from, we haven't even introduced you yet, but I ended up falling into history because I'm from Florida, originally from Seminole Territory. and well, I'm not done yet.
All people from Florida obviously get degrees in history.
I moved up and I went to UBC, and being an American, I thought that if I took one of my electives, 20th century U.S. history, that I would ace it as an elective. Thought for sure I was going to ace it because I was American. Of course I knew everything. I realized when I took that course, I knew nothing about American history, nothing. So I became really fascinated. So I ended up doing a history degree. And also it really helped introduce me to like concepts of social justice and social movements, which ended up being really important. And then I did my second undergrad degree because I ended up after I graduated, falling into youth work. I was doing, working for a pre-employment program for youth that were out of school, and ended up doing group homework as well and one-to-one outreach, and realized even though I was good, I had some natural skills, I needed to know how to do what I was doing. I needed training. I needed proper training. So I had been told by Nanette Taylor, who was the executive director of Hollyburn Family Services, which is one of the places I was working at, to look at the School of Child and Youth Care. So not only am I teaching there, but I'm also a graduate of the School of Child and Youth Care at the University of Victoria.
Fun fact, as you know, I am also American, and I never had a history teacher in high school who was not also the football coach. And I can tell you they were not hired because of their knowledge of American history.
Yes, true. And let's face it, like learning history by standardized tests was not very helpful. I mean, I remember learning that World War I didn't start in 1917 when the U.S. got involved, and my head just about exploded. So,
see, we didn't have standardized tests or exams of any kind. We watched a lot of Mel Gibson movies. So,
Braveheart.
Well, I think he also did a lot of like American history, kind of so-called movies. Anyway, yes, that's you. How did I do introducing you?
Excellent. Thank you. I'm off the hook now.
And I'm also a grad of the Child and Youth Care program for my BCYC and my MA.
Yes.
And
now you are a sessional instructor there as well.
I am. And I also do other research on the side. So I teach part-time, and I also coordinate a number of different research projects. Everything that I do usually has some kind of intersection with gender, be it like gender and religion, or gender-based violence, or gender and housing. So that's sort of the through line in my work professionally. But like you, I worked in so many different contexts. I usually say whatever place you could find a child and youth care worker, I probably did it. One-to-one care with kids with disabilities, worked in a middle school, or psychiatric outpatient, and we just sort of float from place to place, I think.
Yeah, and I find it so interesting that I remember when I was working in the field, and every 2 to 3 years or so, I would change jobs in the field. And I remember my grandfather, the colonel, being very concerned about how my reputation was going to be infected as being this job hopper. But now I can look and go, hey, Colonel, it actually has been really helpful to have all of these various experiences in the field as an instructor to walk alongside students.
Yeah. How bad do you think it is that when you said the Colonel, I had like Kentucky Fried Chicken guy in my head? Was he like that?
Yeah. Did he look like that? Well, yeah, in some ways he didn't have the beard, but yeah. Colonel Lester Mandel was definitely a force. He was.
If you told me that the Kentucky Fried Chicken logo guy's name was Lester Mandel, I would believe you. 100%.
It's not. That is my grandfather. Well, my husband's grandfather's name, I was very close to him, but yeah. But now, again, we have a next topic for our podcast could be on the real name of.
Isn't it Colonel Sanders?
Yeah. Yeah. Colonel Sanders. Yeah. Of course it is. Jeez. I guess there you go.
Somebody put it in the
mystery
comments
solved.
of this podcast. Yeah. Anyway, so that's why we come together to talk about fast food logos. Now let's move on to Wendy's. So I think it's worth mentioning that you were my professor in the very last class that I took for my child youth care degree.
Yeah, that makes me feel even older.
And I was one of those annoying students who didn't follow the instructions for this assignment, which is weird for me because usually I do like follow instructions very carefully on assignments. But this one I was like, last assignment of my degree, I'm just going to write whatever I want. And you were very generous and you're like, okay. And you gave me this amazing feedback on this very personal essay that I wrote, which I still have today.
Really?
Yep. And
I love that. And again, I know you say that you considered yourself annoying, but no. I love that. I love when students know what it is that they want to share and why. I'm a sucker for a good story, being a narrative therapist, of course, but also I'm also relational. And so if a student has something they want to share with me around their learning, I'm prepared to set aside kind of what the expectations are so that I can walk alongside and kind of like, I think that's where the biggest transformation can be and the biggest learning and growth can be. And again, as you know, my marking style is and was and continues to always be very personalized, very conversational. So I tend to like open up in paper and still old school. At least I think back then I had them, they were all printed, right? And I would handwrite, yeah. I had a TA who was like, no, trees, no. And taught me how to do it kind of more online or not online, but at least on screen. So I shifted that way, but I still do it that way. I go right through the paper, tracking changes, and just have conversations with students. And I love that. I feel so honored for students to share their own learning, especially since most of the courses that I teach are fourth year. And by that point, I think students know what it is they want to get from a course. They know what they want to learn and what that looks like. And sometimes that fits with what the assignment description is, and sometimes it has to look different. Sometimes I have to get out of the way so that students can show me what they want to know.
I think especially in theory-driven courses, it's not always like this, but sometimes your only interactions with students can be around marking, especially if it's a big class, if you have 60 or 70 people and people are taking it as an elective from other departments, that we shouldn't trivialize what we do when we're, maybe marking isn't even the right word, interacting with their outputs.
And you know what? Sometimes, like you said, for these larger classes or classes that are online or asynchronous and we don't have time together to see each other, sometimes it's in those assignments that's the only time you get to have any kind of relationship with a student, for them to see you and you to see them. Right. So, it's interesting because I know you said that you still kept that paper from very long ago. I have a lot of students that'll reach out for grad references or after they've graduated, want me to know what they're doing in the field. And they'll often attach those papers to say, remember when you said this? Or, or they'll put in their course eval surveys that feedback was what helped guide them in their practice. Not to pat myself in the back, but, because I don't know how to mark any other way. But it reminds me that again, like what we learned from our project together is relationship is everything. And how do we create those spaces and opportunities, whether it's in a giant theory course, whether it's in person, whether it's online, whether it's synchronous or not synchronous? How do we find those moments as instructors and practitioners to create that relational presence?
And for this project that you mentioned specifically, we were looking at relational online pedagogy. And there was a reason we did this.
Yes.
It's because we had a trauma bond that formed out of the COVID experience. Why don't you tell the story?
Oh, well,
I think I was your TA at the time.
you were, thank goodness for you. Yeah. Hashtag Team Braless.
That's right. That's great. Because we went
Maybe
the
we
whole...
should have worn those shirts
We should have. Because
for our podcast. Maybe that's the name of our podcast, but I think people would think that would be a totally different podcast than what we're doing here.
To explain, just so that the listeners don't go endlessly astray.
Oh yeah,
It was
maybe we'll have to
COVID.
edit.
And I think I did not wear a bra for like a period of a year. So I
Yeah.
didn't leave the house.
Yeah, absolutely. Same, right? And I think still, I was talking to somebody the other day and we talked about the Zoom mullet, right? Like all
Yeah.
business up top and, all comfort, the rest of the way down, So, well, anyway, to get back to the course, while our program in child and youth care, I've always done like distance learning and have offered most, if not all, courses online at some point. There was always this one course, and we had both had experience teaching online, teaching synchronously, teaching asynchronously.
And I should
practice
add that I
courses.
did my entire degree
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
Except
And
for
yeah.
this one course that
This
we're going to talk
one course, this one advanced practice course, which students, no matter where they were, all had to come for these 10 days, this 10-day intensive. And it had only ever been taught on campus. And it was considered, I know some people in the past have called it like a capstone course. Some people have just called it like a colossal pain in the butt course where they all have to come for 10 days. But before COVID, it had never been offered online. And of course, with all the planning that we were able to do, in teaching this course during COVID, we were all new to everything. We were all experiencing the trauma of a pandemic, of, watching people around us in our community isolated and getting very, very sick, and the deaths that were happening around us. And I think it was just such a challenging time on so many levels that I don't even know if we've processed that at all. But one thing that we did was we had to teach this course online.
And I have to say that I went in very much feeling that wasn't going to be possible. And frankly, feeling badly for the students who had to take it with us. And because it was like overnight that it had to be
It was
transformed.
literally virtually overnight. And to be honest, I hadn't had any experience using Zoom. Would never have really thought about that. Even when we taught online, we weren't really using synchronous moments. It was, you had to, back in the day, you'd have to mail in your VHS tapes. I don't know if you know what those are. And then, as it got a little bit more advanced, we would have to send in like the little USBs. And then eventually we started to know how to technology kind of kept up. But, being Gen X, I'm very much like always trying to, I'm both resistant to new technology, but also, even though reluctant, am adaptable. So I think, and I think we talked about this the other day, I'm catching up to what the younger generations of students and my kids know to be part of their everyday. So catching up to that. And we had to do that like in the moment. And even then, Zoom wasn't even ready for us, right? Like the concept of breakout rooms, the concept of backgrounds, right? Like I remember having to buy one of those giant privacy screens so students wouldn't know that I was in the middle of my living room. So
I remember
really,
Allison Gerlach, who's another prof in CYC, early in the pandemic, she's like, okay, I'm going to send you a Zoom. And I'm like, a Zoom? Oh, Allison, you and your like cryptic ways, like, what is this Zoom? Can I do it? Um,
Yeah, I wasn't sure. And I figured, okay, we just got to stumble through it this one time and then everything will get back to
Normal.
normal, right? And we'll just go back to campus again. But what we learned, and what you and I also learned, is that once you ring that bell, you can't unring that bell. And once we offered it once online, we had to keep offering that as an option. And there's programs that have been doing this forever, right? That they've been doing this for a while. And I had to catch up not just as an instructor, but also as a practitioner, because I was also having to continue to see clients online. And so not only did that make teaching online, teaching practice skills that I always assumed had to be in person online, but also recognizing that for some of our students, they were going to be practicing online too. So how do I shift how I was teaching and what that looked like as well?
Yeah. I had a thought and now I lost it.
Yeah, it's all right.
So, so that's where you came up with this idea for this little
Yeah,
project.
well, I realized, because, and I'm just going to be, for full transparency here. I really wanted to look at not just how we were offering practice courses online and ask my colleagues, because I'd had conversations with them and in different, areas casually. But if it could be done, and if I was so concerned because, in child and youth care, as we don't just have a responsibility to the university and to the school and to the students, but also to the field and to the children, youth, and families that are students once they graduate, and even when they're in the program and doing practicum positions, that how do I make sure that these are practitioners that have a solid sense of how they work, why they work, and can engage in ethical practice. So I was a little nervous. So I really wanted to look at how we were doing it and if it was something that had efficacy, right?
Because there's an ethical obligation in there, because when you're, sending someone out from a child and youth care program with a degree, it's a way of saying this person is qualified to practice in the field and they've been given the skills that they need to do so.
Absolutely. And even though, I really do feel that our program, even though might have students that might not be frontline working with children, youth, and families, most of our students are, at least starting out in the field on the front line. So I do want to make sure that I'm considering who they're going to be walking alongside.
And I think the shift for us happened when, and I think maybe for everybody, when we realized that the transition online was not a stopgap measure, it was here to stay. So much of our life has just become lived online. Even the phrase like, oh, there's your online life and then there's your real life, that's not a thing.
Right. Yeah. All, IRL in real life or online. Right. Yeah. And you know what? I've had to catch up with that, with the clients that I have as well, of respecting and honoring the value of the relationships that they have with people online that they might not have met in real life. And so it's really helped me make that shift. So even though when we started this project, not only did I have a reluctance, but there was a part of me, and I think one of our participants pointed that out, there was a part of me that was hoping that the conclusion would be, no, we got to take this back on campus. We just have to be back on campus. But, we thoughtfully listened to these various practitioners / instructors and really listened to how they were engaged in that process and what that looked like for them. We talked to one person who had been doing that before COVID and the pandemic. So it was something that they were comfortable with. We've talked to another practitioner that as soon as the opportunity arose for them to get back on campus, they knew that was the best way for them to walk alongside. And so they were able to be on campus. And then we talked to practitioner instructors that were finding ways and continuing now that we're kind of on the other side of the pandemic, really having an opportunity and starting to have those conversations on how am I creating a relational space? Because it really came down to relationality, I think, was one of the core themes. And how am I creating those spaces for students to learn and get what they need from those virtual spaces, right?
Because
spaces 10 times in one sentence. Well done.
Because in recognizing that this is here to stay, then we have, again, an ethical obligation to say, all right, well, how are we going to do it well? And
Exactly.
especially
Yeah.
if people are going to be practicing online, if even in some part, if they're learning in that mode, and the literature review revealed this as well, if they are learning how to practice in that mode, then they are prepared to go and do that in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was also about respecting, and I think you had brought this up, respecting students' choice of how
Yeah.
and the space that they're choosing to learn in, and holding them capable of knowing what's going to work for them, right? Because we've talked about, and I know Jin Sun Yoon talks about learning in place
Mm.
and the power of that, of being able to learn within your, particularly with Indigenous students,
Yes.
learn from within their community and bringing their knowledges from their culture and community into that learning space, as well as being able to have access to higher education in ways that are as meaningful.
Yeah,
So,
especially
yeah,
with Indigenous learners, if you're telling them that they are required to leave their lands and
yeah,
communities in order to access professional development, something is wrong there.
yeah,
Yeah. Not that Indigenous learners are the only people who benefit from having online options. They're like, I was able to do my degree because I could do it online and I can do
yeah,
it part time. So I
yeah.
had
And
to
we have,
work
yeah,
through the whole thing, right? Not everyone who
yeah.
comes into child and youth care specifically is 18 and out of high school and can live with their mom and dad and has, RESP that can fund their degree.
Oh, absolutely. And, I know when I was in the child and youth care program, again, it was my second undergrad degree. So I was considered a mature student. So I had the ability to do it then, but a lot of our mature students don't have the opportunity to do that. They are working full time, they have families, they have kids that they're raising. And we have to look at ways to meaningfully provide opportunities for them to develop their practice.
And
And
very often,
so,
those are exactly the people that we want in child and
yeah,
youth care.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that even though the University of Victoria continues to pride itself on being considered like a destination university where students come and are there, and that might work for a lot of students, being able to have the option, be able to do that in a way that, again, is ethical and helpful
Hmm.
is important. So it's I'm really amazed to come out the other side of this project, not just with more insight into how do I provide those spaces and what does that look like for me, but realizing that it's a great opportunity and really thinking that it's something that we need to continue to talk about and look at how are we doing this well,
Yeah. So
because it can be.
how do we do it
How
well?
do we?
It's yeah. So here we are
Yeah.
having to do this, and how do we do it well? Sam, tell us.
Well, as with any difficult or challenging or big question,
Don't say it.
um, the
Don't say it.
answer is
No.
it depends.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say it depends, or it's complicated, or it's a very nuanced issue.
Oh,
Okay.
well, I'll
We
just
don't
say
say
it
that.
depends.
Just
And
give us the
I,
tips and tricks. Do we look at the green dot? Do we what?
well, it's interesting because that was one of the things that I attended a training on kind of telehealth and kind of looking
Mm.
at providing client services online. And there was discussion about drawing from television, radio, and podcasting. Boo boo.
Mm.
And some of the things that they were talking about was around like the eye contact and what does that look like in an online space. And so they were talking about how you look at the green dot and, realizing that that's the opposite of eye contact. You're looking
Yeah.
at a green dot, you're literally not looking at the person. So having to shift and adjust and look at what do these, even the most basic attending skills look like in an online space, right? And so having those conversations and realizing that, again, the common factor is around, relational practice. How do you show up, right? How are you seeing students and how are students seeing you? And again, also, how are students seeing each other?
And I think
So
what
that,
we found in the study, and I think is kind of confirmed through our own experience too, is that some things that just happen when you're in a physical shared space with people,
yeah,
you have to do with great intentionality online.
Oh my gosh, yes, the water cooler talk, as I,
Right.
or the before class chats or
Mm-hmm.
after class chats. Yeah, that was really challenging, and I know that a lot of us have tried to do, like, I remember I would try to open the Zoom room up early, 15 minutes before class started, so that students can kind of just show up and have conversations with each other. But I was kind of, even though I wasn't there, if I was trying to present as if I wasn't there, there was always kind of this big brother that, Sam's there. So it got in the way of having those spontaneous conversations. But offering those opportunities, and also some things that, we were doing was virtual office hours and trying to move those around so that students could just pop in. And what I found so fascinating is I did that in a asynchronous practice course. And I tried to move my virtual office hours around to different times and different days, and would even ask students what worked best for them so they would have an opportunity. Not every student did that, but I found it created such a community because students would show up
Mm-hmm.
and there would be a structured question answer question, because sometimes students just wanted to pop in, they had a question about assignment and they were out. And I found that I thought that's what it was going to be like, which students just pop in, they ask their question, and they leave like you would in office hours. But I found that there were students that were there and just sticking around for a whole
Mm-hmm.
hour, two
Mm-hmm.
hours, and realizing that they were seeking community, not just with me, but with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that really, how do I create these other opportunities for that?
You had those virtual office hours. One time in a course with Dr. Jessica Ball, we had these fireside chats. It was
Ah,
kind of like an hour where you could come and hang out and talk. In asynchronous courses, I often set up on an off-topic forum where people will post funny videos they found or news articles that are somewhat related to the class or just anything that they want to share. And I go in there too and share things that I find. Like that. I love a good meme and
and you know what? That's something I want you to talk about more too, because I think this concept of personability and, like, and I know you mentioned you don't like the word authentic, and we can talk about that too. Maybe that's podcast number two. But
mm,
this idea of authenticity and vulnerability, like if we're
mhm.
going to ask students to do this and create, like, as Richardson and Reynolds would say, like, create a safe enough space for students to take risks and be vulnerable and try on new things. How do we also model that as well, right? How are we showing up in a human way, right? Like, you can see that there's pictures behind me, but also there's been opportunities that, let's face it, we have cameo appearances by our pets and by
Mhm.
our children. And, how do we actually allow students to see who we are as well?
There have been several times, just in the course that I'm teaching at the moment, where students will want to meet with me and they'll have to meet with me when my 4-year-old son is home. And so I'll tell them, like he might want to come in and say hi. And I let that happen for his sake and because I also want to see him. But I also want them to see that I'm doing the same things that they're doing. Because
Yeah.
so many of them are balancing, if it's not a kid, it could be an elderly parent or two jobs on top of trying to take their courses, any number of things. And they come in and interrupt and bump up against what we're doing in the classroom, and that's fine. That's completely fine. And so I
Yeah.
think the part of that, I'll say authenticity, is doing that. I had a huge flood in my place recently.
Yeah.
And I let students know. I was like, hey, I'm going to be like posting your next discussion thing tomorrow because I just had a huge flood. And people and when I make these posts, I make weekly announcements, and they're usually pretty chatty. I talk about life a little bit. I also let them know what the expectations are this week, what they might want to be thinking about for the coming weeks, and people really respond to that. They'll email me and say, "Sorry about your flood." Um, Someone
Yeah.
even is like, my husband is a plumber and we live 2 hours away. Would you like us to come? Um,
Oh,
One person just tried to cheer me up by sending me cat photos. So creating the environment where we can be like that together, I think that's to me what an
yeah.
online relational space looks like.
Absolutely. And it has to, right? Like that humanness, that if we're going to create like kind of a space for them to try on new things, that they need to know that not only do we see them, but they can see us as well, right? And being intentional with that and authentic, right? There's been times that even when the course would be on campus, that I remember having to bring my kiddo in and thought that they would just sit in my office while I was teaching. No, 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 not my kid. And of course, they use my own line against me, which is it's child and youth care. So that is what this is. And I am child and youth care. And so they would pop into class. And so sometimes not only does that happen accidentally and realizing
I
people's real
think I
lives,
know which kid this was.
oh, yes. Yes, you do. And they continue to do that. I think I might have mentioned last week, I was in a meeting that wasn't a confidential meeting. So everybody out there, no need to worry about that. And I did say I'm in a meeting. They could hear me talking with a few of my colleagues. And they needed something out of my office, or they decided that they needed something out of my office and couldn't wait until the end of my meeting, and thought the best thing to do would be to army crawl behind me to get what they needed here, not realizing that everybody can see them doing this behind me.
What did you do?
And I'm also watching in the camera, watching my child do this, thinking they're being, and everybody just stopped. We're very quiet and we watched the whole thing. Watched she did her whole process, came and got the, I don't know, it was a sharpener or scissors or something. She's very crafty, this one. And then back out again. And I'm really grateful that, again, as we said, it's child and youth care. But, you know, it's recognizing that having a glimpse into someone's life is an honor and a privilege. And to be honest, that's not just what we're seeing and asking of our students. That's what we're asking them to do in the field as well.
I think there was one time when Beckett came in when I was meeting with a student. I think he had no pants. He is only 4. Similar situation. I was like, well, it's child and youth care. Here's my half-naked child.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes, you know, it's helpful to get students to pay attention. I remember when I was on, you know, maternity leave with G, my youngest, and was asked to come in and teach a class for somebody who was going to be away that week. And so I came in and I was doing the attachment parenting. So I was baby wearing. So I put Georgia in like one of those Bjorns where she was facing out. And, you know, I just was like teaching and doing my lecture the whole time. And students were...
That's so cute.
I never had such an attentive class ever. And I kept forgetting that I was wearing the baby. And so they were making the faces at her, not me. I was like, yeah, I'm crushing this one. Crushing it. Yep. I don't know if they remembered everything I talked about, but I was told
But they
that it was
probably
very...
remembered the baby.
Oh, yes. Well, because she was, you know, having her moment. I eventually just, you know, but I think it's those moments that how do we bring them? And it's not even how do we bring them in online space? How do we not? Right. And how do we do it intentionally in ways that we know are showing students that, you know, when you see people in person, it's easy to see that they're human. Right. But when you see people online, how do we bring that humanness to that digital space?
I think it helps to remember that people, and not even just younger people, but people in general are used to creating online communities. Like we have Discord and we have Reddit and we have even, you know, like Facebook and Instagram where these communities come together and form. So it's not a foreign thing to bring people into an online classroom. I think what we need to get better at is using some of those same approaches that we see in Reddit, for example. So like starting a thread and having a casual conversation about it, not saying, okay, everybody, now you're going to make a post and it's going to have 3 references. It's going to be an APA style. Like I like to create discussion post opportunities that are for people to share a story or an insight or connect it to their life somehow, not in an academic way. I'm all for academic writing. Huge on academic writing, but not in discussion forums, which is where you want things to get personal.
Yeah, and it's not, again, to be in my systems training, it's not either or, it's both and. How do we create opportunities knowing that we're developing, opportunities for academic writing and there's going to be some assignments that are going to do that. And also that we're developing practitioners. So how do we create spaces for them to be able to do that more casually? Because knowing that if those are the moments that we tend to learn the most from, that how do we create those in an online space?
Oh, I know a sneaky thing I do.
What do you do?
I find a controversial news article on the topic that's like relating to what we talk about, and I post it and I'm like, talk about this, and let them have feelings about it.
Yeah. And I think also it's about why, like you said, it's about being intentional with why, right? Because like online courses, students hate discussion posts every week. The whole post by Thursday, respond by Sunday. It can be so monotonous, right? If it's done every week and you're having, like you said, you have to use the APA. And how do we make those more casual, intentional spaces? Maybe it doesn't have to be discussion post every week. Maybe you're just choosing certain ones. Maybe, as you said, you're bringing in more current events instead of everything being so driven by, a particular topic at a time, right? How do we shift from that? How do we adapt and pivot? So I think it's really important because we're even looking now at some of our courses that are more kind of pass fail, like moving our project into pass fail. Of if it's pass fail, how do we, expect students to engage with online resources or online spaces if they don't have to? But again, recognizing that sometimes students are busy and maybe that, isn't necessary for that course. What are their needs? And as far as the learning is, where do they need to connect? Where is community there? And giving them opportunities and spaces, like you said, having just like a discussion kind of like create a forum that it doesn't have to do with anything that's happening around the curriculum, but has to do with other things that are happening in their life, like cat memes.
Yeah, it can be cat memes, but it's usually like what it tends to get filled with is something someone saw and it's related to the course somehow and they want to share it. Yeah.
So those are great ways to bring those. And like you said, like I love now I do making weekly videos where I'm just kind of talking about what's going to happen for the week, what's the overview, what's expected of them. I don't necessarily love making those videos because there's no engagement. I literally am staring at the green dot at the top of the screen and it's not my jam, as we learned from, lunch and learns where everybody has their camera off. So even in these online spaces, it's recognizing, okay, I'm doing this for students to see me, even if it's hard, even if I'm not getting much back, right? Like I need to be like, I have to have that engagement. Otherwise it's just like a one way, like doing a lunch and learn online and realizing everybody had their cameras off and I was just kind of talking at the screen and realized that eventually my voice just got really quiet and just really, I was not myself, and realizing that it's also about how I show up and, I need to have some kind of engagement or an intent of what I'm trying to achieve.
I think like now we've sort of moved into the more technical things, like what are the little specific things that we have learned and that we've learned from doing the study that people have, like technically, how do you manage the architecture of an online classroom? And our participants talked about that, and everybody develops their own ways, and it's going to vary a little bit based on the course. But I think that you don't have to be the most tech savvy person in order to, like, I don't think either of us are the most tech savvy people, but I also think that we're able to create meaningful online spaces, and it helps to know a few useful things. So is there anything that we kind of haven't hit upon, because we've been gabbing away for like 40 minutes now? What have we missed?
I think the idea, like, and again, as I mentioned, like with it depends. I think a lot of the process, I mean, we can come up with lists of tips and tricks of like processes that work for us. But I think a lot of it is encouraging instructors to have conversations with each other and to reflect on what are they implicitly doing that they can make more explicit, right? Because what we realized is we're already doing a lot of these things, but without realizing that there's an intent to this and how it can be further developed, right? Like we're doing videos because, maybe it's easier, or we have the technology, but realizing that that's an opportunity to be seen. So recognizing that it's important for us to get a sense of why we do what we do. and to talk to each other to get an idea of what works for you. Because, sometimes talking to somebody is people are verbal processors like me. So it's a great opportunity to start having these conversations around what their reluctance might have been. Because what we realized is we weren't the only ones that were reluctant to teach practice skills online. And realizing that a lot of that reluctance is based on this idea of being seen and seeing our students, and really steeped in kind of relational pedagogy without even realizing that, or taking how we show up in our practice and bringing that into our teaching. And so realizing the same reluctance was what often made them the best equipped to be able to teach in these online spaces, because they had to really look at what assumptions was I making around what this had to look like, and how am I making it work online, right? Or how can I? And can I? Or do I want to? So I think having conversations with other instructors that are doing this, and also starting to reflect on what works for me and why, and what else could I do to kind of continue to build that space to be one that develops practitioners in really thoughtful, respectful ways.
And I do think that you're right when you said it depends. That not everyone is going to love online teaching.
Yeah.
And I do think that if you go into it with the feeling like I hate this and I don't want to be here, students will know that. I think there are some people who are like, I like both. There are pros and cons to both. But if the instructor does not want to be in that classroom, it almost never goes well. So I think there is some obligation on our part if we're going to do this. If you are in an online classroom, you have to figure out how to do it well. You should, and it can be done, and it doesn't have to be miserable.
And it's not going to look the same for each instructor, right? Even teaching the same exact course, right? Like, I might not create a discussion post where people can kind of just talk about things. I might not create a discussion post around, like a current event that's happening or something that's controversial. I might look for other ways, right? So again, there's not an exhaustive list of what this has to look like, right? Or the best practices. It's really about intentionality, and it has to do with our own individual way of looking at how do we create these spaces? What does this look like to us? And the more we get clear about the assumptions we were making about what that looked like on campus, and what made it easier on campus, or what we thought made it easier on campus, and what we're hearing from our students, and what we're hearing about what works for us in these online spaces, because we can do this. It's so interesting because there's still, I don't think it's necessarily generational, but maybe it is a bit. But I have, older people in my life that when I'm like, hey, let's Zoom. And they're like, no, not going to Zoom. I either see you in person for coffee or not at all. And realizing that for some people, that's just where their comfort is. And also realizing that relationships are it really has to look at, like you said, people's intentionality of choosing a digital space or being able to adapt and pivot to that. So our students need to be able to choose it, and we need to be able to choose it.
It came out in the literature review for this study, and in conversations recently I've had with students who offered this, that if you're forced into online learning, of course it's not going to go great. But a lot of people choose online learning on purpose and for a reason and enjoy it. Like, I had 2 students this term say to me, if I hadn't had the option to do at least some of my courses online, it would have been overwhelming and too much for me. I needed that online.
And that's interesting that you say that, because I think it's also about us having to look at what respect looks like online, what present looks like online for students around, like, cameras on, cameras off, muting on, muting off. And I think it's easy to say, it would be really easy to dismiss it as like, we can't do it online because students, they have their cameras off. But in the same way that you would require presence and attendance and expectation of being present in person, we just need to find a way to do that online. You need to have your cameras on because it shows respect to the instructor and your classmates around being present. what does confidentiality need to look like, right? Like maybe not doing this when you're at a Starbucks. You need to be at home. You need to make sure that, you have a private space. And so we do need to talk about, there is still limits to accessibility around Wi-Fi and the ability to have those things. So we need to have those conversations and recognize and have respect for that online space. Because I think it is important that students have that opportunity and holding them capable of making decision about what's going to work best for them, right?
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah. And there was one last thing what was I going to say? Something. I forgot now.
I don't know.
Must not have been that important.
So to wrap up, what do we want to leave people with as a final thought? What's your final thought?
Stay curious and give digital space a chance.
Yeah.
Right? Like we can do this. And I think, getting curious about how you show up, getting curious about the assumptions you're making about students in your classroom, online and digitally, and about talking and creating community with other instructors. And again, just staying curious. That's what I think needs to happen. How about you? What do you think?
I think there's something, the word that keeps coming to my mind is being charitable, which I think is assuming the best intentions of the other person, which we can't do in every circumstance, but we can in a lot, like in an online classroom. People are coming in with different comfort levels, with different hopes for, maybe they didn't want to be online, maybe they did, but I think you can have high standards of students that are met through kindness and being kind. We can have both of those things at the same time. And I think that's very true when you're cultivating a meaningful online classroom. If somebody's microphone doesn't work, or I don't know, just my overall ethos, is that the right word? My overall philosophy, my teaching philosophy. It is something about that. We can have high standards and we can be kind and flexible at the same time. And for me, that becomes very clear when I'm doing online teaching.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you would say that, because so many of the ways we do that, we've been doing that. We have been doing that in the classroom, right? Around how we show up in our marking, how we show up around allowing students to kind of take ownership of their assignments and their learning, right? And kind of hold them capable of wanting to be there and doing that, right? So how do we, we can do that. We're already doing that.
I'm sure you've known people, I don't know if this is an aside or not, but there can be an attitude that like students are out to get you and they will take advantage of you as the instructor at every turn to try to do the bare minimum or get away with everything they can get away with. That has not been my experience at all.
No.
I don't know if it's just child and youth care students that are so great or what it is, but
and that, I'm telling you, it's interesting that you would say that, because I do believe that there's always going to be an occasional student that they might show up like that, but I would have to spend so much energy. And sometimes I can read a syllabus, or I can read like essential requirements or expectations and realize, oh, this is in response to someone's experience with a student who did this, right? Like if we attend to and spend so much time and effort to make sure those students don't, get through loopholes or anything, we miss opportunities for the rest, which is the majority of our students, to really just hold space for their learning and growth. So instead of kind of chasing down the students that are trying to just check a box and get through the degree and do what they need to do.
I have had remarkably, it's been like 5 years now of teaching, and I have had remarkably few of those students. The people who show up really care. I am not kidding. They really care.
I agree.
And they want to be there. Yeah. And
where do you want to spend your energy, right? Where do you want to spend your time and energy, right? So I've never had a student who wanted to, as you said at the beginning, kind of go outside the lines and kind of do their own kind of assignment. I've never had a student want to do that because they wanted to get away from the work, right? Yeah. It's always because they wanted to show and kind of take responsibility and accountability for their own learning. And let's face it, that's what we're trying to do. That's a big goal.
Yep. Okay. I think we're done.
We're done here.
We're done. All right. I wish we had some snappy closing line.
Okay, Kat. Okay. Jeez.
That's the closing line.
Can you hear the door?